Hello and welcome to Public Pictures Theater. Tonight we'll be watching the 1940s classic His Girl Friday, starring Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell.
You'll notice throughout this film that characters often talk over each other and run through their dialogue quickly. It is designed to mimic what we think of when we imagine busy and bustling newspaper offices.
His Girl Friday was one of the first films to employ this technique of having actors talk over each other in order to present a more realistic pace and feel to the film, as opposed to having each actor wait to start his or her line after their scene partner has finished theirs first.
You know, the normal rate of words per minute in a standard Hollywood film is about 90. His Girl Friday has a word per minute rate of about 140. To capture all these words, Howard Hawks, the director, used multiple mics on set instead of the traditional overhead boom mic. As the characters would move or switch between lines, technicians would have to manually switch between mics, sometimes up to 35 times per scene, in order to capture everything.
Rosalind Russell, who plays Hildy in the film, saw her script and felt that Cary Grant had all the best lines in the picture. So she hired her very own advertisement writer to write her a full script worth of catchy lines to ad-lib each day of filming.
This film is based on another public domain film entitled The Front Page. Originally, both leads were male in the original script, but as they were running the lines, a secretary, a female, played one of the characters, and the director, Howard Hawks, liked the sound of the lines coming from a female so much that they changed the script to have a female and a male lead.
Please enjoy His Girl Friday here on Public Pictures Theater.
Welcome to our panel discussion. My name is Dr. David Loomis. I'm a journalism professor at IUP. I'm here with my panelists, Donald Winzer and Sarah Everett. So what did you guys think about His Girl Friday?
You can start.
I really liked this film. I really liked the way that the female character was shown throughout the film. She had a really strong role, and for me that was important. I also liked the way that the dialogue was really sped up, and it made the whole thing feel very authentic to the time period.
I agree. I think my dialogue was probably their dialogue was probably my favorite part. I felt a little weird about them kind of exploiting his problem, though, the cop killer. I felt a little awkward about that, but I love the chemistry. I love Cary Grant on everything he's ever been in, pretty much, and I think, yeah, all in all, good, solid flick.
Other films like this, always known for having the best written female, are not always known for having the best written female characters. What are your thoughts about Rosalind Russell's central character, Hildy?
I thought, watching the film as a female, I thought it was really amazing how strong she was, how committed to her career she was. At the beginning of the film, they talked about how she was married to Cary Grant and the marriage was just terrible because it wasn't what she wanted, because that wasn't the traditional marriage. And at the end of the film, she goes back to him, and that's exactly what they have again. And I think it just shows that not everybody has to fit into that traditional female role. They can have a career, and that can be what they focus on. And I think that was really important to have in a female character, especially in a film from the 1940s.
I agree, definitely. So, something about the way she entered each scene individually, when she first came into the movie and started talking to Cary Grant, and then when she went into the reporters' rooms where they were all playing cards, there's just something about how she entered the scene and just started delivering dialogue like, I'm here, I'm the boss, like, I'm this. She had a great on-screen presence as an actress, and the character, I think, benefited from that tremendously, especially for a film from the time. And I mean, even today, we don't have female leads this good, honestly.
What did you think of her in the film?
Well, it was interesting that a film about journalism cast a woman as a journalist at all, because there were darn few women in journalism at that time. Dorothy Thompson, a very famous name in New York journalism in the 1930s and 1940s, comes to mind, not many others. So the fact that Howard Hawks cast a woman in the lead role of this rather well-established script from the early 1920s is a sign of the times, rather ahead of the times, I would say. And Rosalind Russell, a rather classy character and a classy actor, because she never played sex roles. She always played very powerful and professional roles, tells us something about the era of the late 1930s and early 1940s when this film was made.
I think that's an interesting point as well, because when they originally wrote the script, it was for 2 male characters. And then when they had a secretary reading the lines, they decided to change it to a female character. And I think it completely changed the tone of the film. And it made it much more of a romantic comedy than just kind of, could have been a screwball comedy almost, the way they would have had it if it was 2 male characters. So I like that they added a female character and changed the dynamic between the whole script.
The rapid-fire dialogue is integral to this style of film and is part of what makes it iconic. So did any of you have any trouble keeping up? How does it compare with modern films?
So I think, like the trivia says, normal films have about 90 words per minute of dialogue, and this film had around 140. I think it's amazing how they were able to keep up as actors and get those words out as fast as they could on screen, especially to each other, and then still react emotionally the way they did to the lines. I thought it was also interesting that Rosalind Russell brought in an advertiser writer to write some of her dialogue so she could ad-lib it, because that kind of goes along with the fast-paced, punchy lines. And I thought that was really great to put in this film. I think if you walked away for 5 seconds to go somewhere else, you would have missed a lot of dialogue and a lot of what was going on in the scene. It could be really confusing. So you definitely have to be engaged in the film the whole time. And I think that's really great for keeping the film engaging for the audience and making you want to watch it.
I agree. I think that level of required audience engagement to really enjoy the entirety of the film is super important, and I think we've lost that a lot recently in terms of, well, how people watch movies. I mean, it's moved from a theater setting to a living room setting with a lot more input and less focus specifically on one input. And I think it also speaks to how technology has changed, because in the 1940s, it was really expensive to make a film. It was expensive to shoot it on film stock. The cameras were expensive. Every element was miles more expensive than it is now. And I think pre-production on those films needed to be top-notch. I think the dialogue needed to be great, and the scripts needed to be fantastic. Otherwise, I mean, why is someone spending so much money on a film unless you're, trying to make Creature from the Black Lagoon or something? So. And I think that shows through. I think it shows that they did a lot of work on the screenplay, and I think everything was top-notch.
They called it machine gun dialogue because it was so rapid fire. And in this case, it was done for comedic effect, because so many films in the 1930s and 1940s were comparatively stilted. Someone spoke, there was a pause, someone else spoke. When there's verbal overlap like this, audiences thought it was funny, and it was a often copied approach to that kind of filmmaking. Let me ask you a follow-up question.
Sure.
So in the 1930s and 1940s, journalists were portrayed this way. Maybe questionable ethics, but ultimately achieving their goal of finding an innocent man not guilty of the crime that he was falsely accused of. So in the end, journalism does its job, and they are flawed, cunning perhaps, ethically challenged perhaps, certainly pushing the envelope, but ultimately good people. How does that compare with the way the journalists are depicted today in film?
That's an interesting question. I think I recently watched Snowden. It came out, it was directed by Oliver Stone, and that kind of ran the gamut in terms of how they depicted journalists, because on one side you had the quick-witted, the looking out for the truth, trying to protect someone and the American people, really. And on the other side you had journalists really trying to save themselves, protect themselves. And honestly, I think that realistic idea that people are trying to save themselves at the forefront of their actions, regardless of the story, is probably a more common theme today than trying to save someone else, doing all sorts of crazy things to get the truth out. Uncovering, a corrupt, was it a governor or a mayor? And that whole system. And I feel like that's kind of a shame. I like the quick-witted journalist that's just depicted in this film.
when we're thinking of recent films, I think of Nightcrawler. It stars Jake Gyllenhaal in 2014. There was a morally reprehensible human being, and I see a lot of representations of journalists in films since 1940 that suggest that as a whole lot, they're a bunch of bad people, obnoxious, insulting, intrusive, and that has become a common depiction of journalists. I think Spotlight is the exception. In my judgment, the journalists are heroes. They actually wind up uncovering the fact that the Catholic Church covered up a ritual, methodical sexual assault on young Catholic children over several decades. And the problem stemmed not just from the Catholic parish, but all the way to the Pope. So that's a heroic exception to the general rule that I've been seeing lately. That's all we have for this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We hope you enjoyed this His Girl Friday on Public Pictures Theater. Thanks.